Good morning to any journalists joining on the line. And Kristyn, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. My name is Kristyn Wong-Tam, and I'm a member of Provincial Parliament. I represent the riding of Toronto Centre. Before I begin and go any further, I'd like to acknowledge that the City of Toronto, which is where I'm hosting this webinar, is the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. And Toronto remains now home to many Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit people. We begin our proceedings with a land acknowledgement to take care of the land that we reside on, but also to respect the water that surrounds it. I want to just recognize that this press conference is being held to support a private members bill, Consent Awareness Week, and I'm also joined by a number of esteemed speakers who are residing in different cities, and they will speak to that as well when it's time for them to take the stage. I'd like to begin by saying that, recent events in Ontario have led to a heightened awareness of the urgency to address sexual violence and consent. From the emerging stories against high-profile musicians and disturbing allegations against junior hockey teams to campus sexual violence, Ontarians need the opportunity to strengthen our understanding of consent. The Consent Awareness Bill, which I've tabled on Tuesday, is really to support a policy recommendation that was developed by students and student unions from across Ontario. This is not something that I am asking for or anyone else on the call. It's the student voices that have brought us here today. It's their requests. The Consent Awareness Bill will actually designate the third week of every September annually as Consent Awareness Week. This week was chosen because it falls in the middle of a time period that gender-based violence experts call the red zone, the 6 to 8 week period at the beginning of any fall semester when 50% of all sexual assaults are reported on campuses. That's when it takes place. So right now we're in the middle of orientation week, universities, colleges, everybody is participating what we know as the traditions of bringing people into the school. And this is what we're seeing on the campuses. I'd like to thank my co-sponsors of the bill, MPP Jill Andrew, Laura May Lindo, and Merritt Stiles. I'd like to extend my heartfelt and sincerest gratitude to Peggy Sattler, MPP of London West, for her wise counsel on this important bill. Officially recognizing Consent Awareness Week would create an opportunity for Ontarians to have thoughtful, affirming, age-appropriate consent conversations. This week is a significant opportunity to celebrate consent as a cornerstone of all our relationships, where we live, work, learn, and play. This will promote a dialogue that will prevent sexual violence and gender-based violence. My bill intends to move us toward a future where we do exactly that. Today, I'm joined here by a number of student leaders, and they come from across Ontario from different campuses. They're also very busy in the middle of their orientation week, so I know that how precious their time is, and they've joined us today. Our first speaker will be Kaneisha Charles. Kaneisha uses they, them pronouns. They are a student at Toronto Metropolitan University, right here in the heart of Toronto Centre, and they're a member of the Consent Action Team. Kaneisha has been a long time vocal champion of Consent Awareness Week, back to their days when they were in high school. Kaneisha, please go ahead.
Thank you, Kristyn. Before becoming a university student, consent was not really a word in my everyday vocabulary. In high school, I did community organizing work around social justice and violence prevention, but conversations around sexual violence were often hindered by a lack of knowledge or resources in my community. I and many of my peers knew what consent was, but we didn't really know what it looked like. It wasn't until I started organizing with the Consent Action Team at Toronto Metropolitan University that I truly learned what a culture of consent is. Now looking back, I can reflect on moments of discomfort, all the way to experiences of violence that I internalized as normal, or worse, as my fault, because I didn't know that my consent mattered. This isn't just my story either. As an organizer with High School 2, a national student-led network that works to end sexual violence in secondary schools, I've seen the same stories shared. Consent Awareness Week is about writing a new story for our young people. It's about reimagining what our relationships and our communities can look like. Consent Awareness Week is about more than just our intimate relationships too. This is especially true for students like myself with multiple intersections of identity. Consent looks like asking permission to touch a Black person's hair. It looks like asking transgender and non-binary students their pronouns and using them. It looks like asking disabled people what their access needs are and building accommodations into everyday spaces. It's about our relationships with others, yes, but also with ourselves, the spaces around us, the land, and more. Consent is at the core of all good relationships, and it's at the foundation of communities that are founded in care. When we talk about and work towards consent culture, we reimagine what our communities could look like, not just for ourselves, but for the generations of students who will come after us. Consent Awareness Week empowers young people to imagine and co-create a future founded in care. I hope that we can begin this legacy today. We ask the members of the Ontario Legislative Assembly to adopt and pass the bill for Consent Awareness Week today with unanimous consent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kaneisha, for those heartfelt words, but also recognizing that your experience, I think, is important. And thank you for sharing all of that and being the student leader that you are. Our next speaker will be Jessica Look. Jessica uses she and her pronouns. She is the Ontario University Student Alliance president. In addition, when she's not doing that, she's also the vice president of external affairs at the University Students' Council at Western. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you to MPP Wong-Tam for the invitation to be a validator for this very important bill. My name is Jessica Look. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the president of the Ontario Undergraduate Student Alliance and vice president external affairs at the University Students' Council at Western University. First off, I'd like to thank MPP Wong-Tam for putting this bill forward and to all of the students, activists, community leaders, and experts who have advocated for years for institutions and governments to do more to address gender-based violence on post-secondary campuses. Today, I would like to share why I think that Consent Awareness Week is such an important initiative and share the concerns that many of my peers have voiced around safety on campus. To students, student leaders, and university faculty and staff, it is no surprise that gender-based violence is prevalent on all post-secondary campuses in Canada and has a devastating impact on students every single year. It is not a new issue, and most orientation week programming includes some sort of discussion about consent, healthy relationships, and campus safety. Unfortunately, a guest speaker or a one-hour presentation has not yet solved the problem. From my personal experience as a student leader at Western last year, I can share how the events that made national news shook our entire university community. Students and student leaders reeled in shock following last year's orientation events. While burnt-out student leaders advocated for change on campus, progress was slow. We felt invisible, discouraged, and undervalued. That is why the adoption of Consent Awareness Week is so important. It highlights the importance of proactive conversations about consent and healthy relationships, gives the community the chance to share educational resources, and works to change the attitudes and mindsets of all members of the campus community. There's so much to be said about having comprehensive, survivor-centric, and trauma-informed responses to sexual violence, which the Ontario Undergraduate Student Alliance has been advocating for years, but there also needs to be more of a focus on how we can prevent this harm. I am hopeful that all members can see that this is not a partisan issue and that this is something we all care about. If the House were to pass this bill and proclaim Consent Awareness Week for the third week of September, Ontario would send an important message to all post-secondary students that gender-based violence on campus is not acceptable and that we are all working together to address it. Gender-based violence has long been a concern for generations of students, and large-scale change is long overdue. The request of the government and the Ontario Legislative Assembly is to adopt and pass the bill, Consent Awareness Week, with unanimous consent. Thank you.
Jessica, thank you so much for your remarks. And I think that you can easily say that you speak for all of us who are on the screen today. And thank you to the leadership that OUSA has demonstrated. Quite honestly, it's inspiring. in so many words. Our next speaker and final speaker is Kayla Han. Kayla uses she and her pronouns. She is a Ontario University Student Alliance board member and the Vice President of Government and Stakeholder Relations at the Laurier Students Union.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you to the Honorable MPP Wong-Tam for the introduction. My name is Kayla Han, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm currently a steering committee member at the Ontario Undergraduate Student Alliance, working with Jessica, and the Vice President of Government and Stakeholder Relations at Laurier Student Union in Waterloo and Brantford, Ontario. On behalf of OUSA and students at Laurier, I am here to support MPP Wong-Tam's bill to proclaim the third week of September as Consent Awareness Week. At our Laurier campuses, we recognize that our student body will be entering the red zone, a term used to describe the first 6 weeks of school where data shows a significant increase of sexual violence on campus. Whether our stories make the news or not, sexual assault is still incredibly prevalent at all post-secondary campuses in Ontario and across Canada. Within our Students' Union, we recognize that we need to be proactive and engage our students in this important discussion as we enter a new, fully in-person school year. Many incoming students have likely not had the educational opportunity to connect with their peers and their teachers about sexual health and sexual violence while in a remote learning environment due to COVID-19. It is up to our campus communities to help promote the conversation of consent and healthy relationships for future generations. Continuing this conversation through initiatives like Consent Awareness Week is an important step in preventing gender-based violence on campuses and striving for a safer campus communities and environments for all. Students across Ontario have been sharing their concerns about safety on campus and the need for institutions, governments, and communities to do more to address gender-based violence on campuses for years. For example, this year, many students groups will be running campaigns and hosting different events during National Consent Awareness Week to continue the discussion of consent, healthy relationships, and addressing gender-based violence on their respective campuses. At Laurier Students' Union, we will be hosting a rally against gender-based violence on our Waterloo and Brantford campuses on September 22nd at 4 p.m. Laurier will be guiding several campuses across Ontario to join the movement against sexual violence, who have made this issue a key priority this year. And as student leaders, we recognize the value of standing in solidarity with our students and survivors and want to emphasize the importance of continuing this conversation beyond Consent Awareness Week. We also want to ensure that students feel supported through the allocation of community services and resources to support them in times of need. It is critical that we amplify the voices of students and survivors who have long spoken about this issue and adequately provide resources and supports so that they can have a safe and welcoming post-secondary experience as they deserve. The request of the government and members of the Ontario Legislative Assembly is to adopt and pass the bill of Consent Awareness Week with unanimous consent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kayla, for those remarks. And thank you for your leadership across not just one campus, but 2 campuses and 2 jurisdictions. It is obviously, a student-led movement. I'm literally here just on behalf of the Ontario NDP caucus to give them a platform so that they can be heard within the House. And I think we've all seen students rise in high schools as well as colleges and universities where they've actually organized on their own walkouts. So this is an issue that has gripped students from across the country, but the Consent Awareness Week is not necessarily exclusively about students. It's about making sure that people are respected and safe in their workplaces, in places of worship, in any place that we are, including at home. So we know that recently the Canadian Women's Foundation has released a report that they said that the Canadian average in terms of awareness around consent is literally 28%. So that means that there's a lot of work and education to be done. And what we're also seeing is that it is at all-time high, the issue of sexual violence. It's at an all-time high in 25 years. So our request, the request to the Ontario Legislative Assembly, is to make sure that we can support the students, ensure that their education experience includes an orientation week that is free and safe, and that throughout the school year, they're going to be free and safe and it's respected. And preventing sexual violence is at the core of how we do that. I'd like to turn this press conference over to Jody in the Ontario Media, NDP Media Room to help us moderate the Q&A session.
So just a reminder to any journalists who wish to ask a question to please use the raise hand function. Your first question comes from Chris Rushaway from the Toronto Star. Chris, please go ahead.
Oh, hi there. Thank you for taking my questions. I guess my first question is, what exactly would this Consent Week look like? Would it be the universities that are running events? Would it be student unions? And what kind of events would you like to see?
Thank you so much, Chris. I think I'm going to turn that question directly over to a student leader. Jessica, would you like to take that on?
Sure. So Consent Awareness Week can look really different across Ontario, and of course it's going to evolve as we go year to year. But in my ideal world, universities and student unions will work together to run these campaigns and programming. I think all of our events and efforts are more powerful when we do it together. So if universities and student unions can work together, do educational campaigns, programming and such for Consent Awareness Week, that would be ideal. And of course, with our MPPs and our government support, that would be fantastic as well.
Thank you, Jessica. Is there any other student leader who'd like to speak to that question?
I'm happy to speak on that as well.
Go ahead.
So we have, yes, thank you so much. And we have a really exciting week planned at Laurier. So we have our sexual assault centers from Waterloo and Brant County working closely with our institution to be able to provide programming on We Believe Survivors Day on the Tuesday of National Consent Awareness Week, which is a really good lead up to our rally. And with our rally, we do have a keynote speaker coming in to talk about how to have the best sex of your life, but we are integrating the concepts of sexual health as well as just safe sex in general and consent. So that kind of way is a really good leeway into what we're doing at the rally, and we're having additional programming. We have some bingo and trivia nights with sexual health involved as well. So we're really integrating these concepts of destigmatizing the conversation as well as just making it not scary and more enjoyable, and it's fun, and you want to continue having these conversations and you want to keep on bringing these conversations to light instead of making it seem terrifying and having students fear-mongering it. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Kayla. And if I may add, Chris, thank you for that question from the Toronto Star. I would say that, we in Ontario already declare a number of significant dates. Whether it's Black History Month or perhaps Tamil History Month or perhaps Emancipation Month, it just gives a time for us to elevate the issue, to bring it into the living rooms, into the boardrooms, and into every space so we can actually have those conversations as Ontarians. So I would anticipate that it would include a range of activities, and it really is limited to the people's imagination. But what's important is that we have those honest discussions in a respectful manner. This is not about laying blame. It's about actually preventing sexual violence and gender-based violence. So it's really about raising awareness and promoting safe and respectful spaces. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And as a follow-up, maybe MPP Wong-Tam, you can answer this question. Do you have any idea, have you approached other parties? Have you approached the government to know if you have support for this?
Thank you very much. Yes, I have spoken to ministers, and they have. I would say they're discussing it within their caucus. Yesterday, I did rise on the House and specifically asked for unanimous consent on the bill that I was introduced. At that point in time, the government House leader said no, and I know that our House team, the NDP House team, is something. This is something that they're working on. The timing of the bill, it is obviously to declare the third week of September Consent Awareness Week. We know that, the things that the Premier will say and the things that government will say, the issues that they bring forward that are important to them are also important to Ontarians. So this is an opportunity for them to act in a timely manner. It's a non-partisan issue. It's about protecting and maintaining safe spaces for students. And most importantly, what I value really above it all else is that actually it's a student movement. Students themselves are saying, this is how you can make our education environment safer and better.
And a reminder to use the raise hand function if there are any other questions. No further questions on the line, so I'll turn it back to you, Kristyn, to close things off.
Okay, thank you so much. To everyone who took the time from their busy days to join us, I recognize that this is a very important issue, especially for the campus communities across Ontario. You've been doing Herculean work, especially for Orientation Week. To our esteemed speakers, thank you very much to Jessica, Kayla, Kaneisha, for joining us today and sharing your stories, but also your experience of how you are demonstrating leadership on your campus to create that safe and also amazing environment for learning. To our MPPs, Peggy Sadler, to Jill, Andrew, to our bill co-sponsors, Mart Style, as well as Laura May Lindo, I want to thank you. And to everybody watching, please have a safe week, and we'll see you on the other side soon. Take care.